Hi everybody. I'm gonna continue. Sorry. I'm gonna continue reading my notes on Dr. John King's book. It's called "Deal with It." Um, Living well with PTSD. So the next thing he talks about, in my view, and of course this is my review, so I'm giving my interpretation of his book. Is the importance of recommitting to yourself. I don't think he openly writes quite with those words, but that's what I got from the book. Because a lot of people that have post-traumatic stress, they have a loss of identity, not only because the post-traumatic stress has altered their brain and they can't recognize themselves, but also because a lot of them didn't have a strong sense of self-identity to begin with. So a lot of people within this community are what psychiatrists and psychologists call codependent on their environment. They feel that they need to read their environment, constantly assess what the best plan of action according to the environment is, not according to their own personal beliefs. But what Dr. King writes in this book is about the cutting in half of your life by trauma. So, for example, if you have a recall event, trauma surfacing, whether it be in the form of visual flashbacks, brain fog is another symptom. So, if you have extreme brain fog and you can't read, that's something that happened to me. I wasn't able to read a page of a book, and that scared the shit out of me. And that was my trauma, bubbling up into my consciousness when I had racing thoughts that I couldn't control. Disassociation, whatever the case may be. All of a sudden, you don't recognize yourself. You're in a different body. So there was one self before the bubbling up of the trauma, whatever shape it takes. In Dr. King's case, he was sitting in a study and he started to scream. And he recalled, well, you would have to read it because I want to censor what he said in the book, but all of a sudden he realized that his parents molested him, and he had a visual flashback. So basically, he says that, okay, you have two selves now. You have your prior self and you have your new self. And he calls his new self John number 2. So the person that is, now that PTSD has woken him up. And he says that John number 2 is more of a recluse. He likes to read poetry. He likes to smoke cigars. He's not as goal-oriented. He's not as driven as he was before. He doesn't define himself based on the actions that he completes in the day. Rather, he defines himself with other things. And he also writes that he has more intuition. And he calls this intuition his superpower. So he basically says, okay, I was one way before my recall and I became a completely different person, almost completely different afterwards. I had different likes, I had different proclivities, I had different sensations about the world, and I had different strengths and weaknesses. So I'm sure all of you can relate to this because you have one paradigm of humanity before you meet sociopaths, and then all of a sudden you have a different paradigm of humanity, more misanthropic a lot of the time, more cynical, more why can't people just fucking see these motherfuckers for who they are instead of pretending like their bullshit doesn't exist. And you only see their bullshit because you've seen what they have done to you, and you've seen how they manipulate people within their inner circle to serve them. So the reality is that you have possession of this new knowledge, and that is your new self. That's part of your new self. He writes about this new selfhood. It is not the battle that concerns me. It is not the obstacles that must be met with that keep me up at night. It is not the unknown that daunts me. It is not the fear of failure. I have failed many times before, and like an old boxer, begged for one more round. It is the sick feeling that I am a shadow of what I could have been. So many people relate to this when they have traumatic stress. All of a sudden, they look at all of their inabilities. They all of a sudden can't be as focused as they are on tasks anymore. Their executive function is deteriorated. They can't plan. They don't see the value of planning because it's like, what's the point of planning if in any moment a bomb can hit you on the head and change you into a different person? That's how you feel. And he's saying that I could have been so much more than I am in my current body. And I can do so much more. And why am I not freaking able to do it? Why can't I just get my shit together? And why do I have to deal with this? That's the angst that he's talking about, in my opinion, again. And he says, okay, this is how we resolve this. We have to accept that we have changed, and we have changed forever. We have new knowledge, we have new intuition, and we have new sensibilities, and nothing will undo that. Once you have knowledge, then you can't undo that knowledge. The only thing is you can modify your life in a way that could use that knowledge to your advantage, or maybe see your new self as not somebody that is completely disempowered and ruined, but somebody that has a deeper understanding, or new strengths, or a new path in life, a new calling. So he's saying, don't see trauma as an eternal curse, turn it into a blessing. And that's your obstacle now. Accepting the second version of yourself, with its faults and with its strengths, and refining it. So then he says, okay, and then, sorry, this gets me excited because it's really great stuff. The next thing I want to write is seeing trauma as a new starting point and potential blessing, not a curse, and the responsibility of the trauma victim to rebuild their lives. I made a video about the responsibility of the trauma victim to rebuild their lives, because the fact is, if you're not behind the wheel, somebody's driving it for you, and that's for everybody. You need to have a say in your life, period, end of sentence. Like, it doesn't matter how incapacitated you are right now, it'll always get better, believe me. He writes, the responsibility for your wholeness and wellness is yours. It isn't someone else's responsibility for you to get well. If you take control of your mind, your desires, and emotions, you take back control of your life. Again, this is what I was talking about before. We have a tendency to try to look for saviors, and that comes from the kind of paradigm of love that we've known before, where one person dominates and another person submits. And instead of running for saviors and whining to people about your life, which may be horrible, which may involve things that are just unthinkable to them, rely on yourself, on your new self, and try to understand that you have a say in every single task that you do, in every single choice that you make. And really, that's how you keep the energy that these energy vampires have tried to suck out of you to yourself. That's how you rebuild your soul. Because the answer is not out there, it's really within you. And once you accept that, then the sociopath has lost the game. If you have a different normal that integrates all of this new knowledge that you have acquired about how they destroy the world and how they manipulate people and how they fuck people over and how they steal and how they lie, then you can actually create a better and more enlightened version of yourself that is more powerful than the first version, that may say no to these things and even go further than you would have gone had you not experienced this apocalyptic revelation of realizing that there are people like this in the world that just enjoy destroying shit for no reason. That's how I interpreted what he was saying. Again, you'd have to read the book to make your own conclusions about this. He also goes to say that many great leaders and people were traumatized. So one example he uses is Abraham Lincoln. And what's interesting is I used to think about Abe Lincoln a lot when I was in elementary school, and he came from a very poor background, and he had no real influences in his life, and he was very reclusive, and he relied on his own mind a lot of the time. And he ended up being our fifth president, you know? That's the point, is that instead of seeing yourself as damaged goods, as a person that will never recover and will never make anything of themselves, see yourself as a person that has survived extreme adversity, extreme, depraved events, horrible events, and still has breath within them, still has the possibility of changing and of thinking and of innovating and of like reinventing existence for themselves and existence for other people, of becoming a new pioneer in something, of changing their life. If you think that you will be great, chances are that you will get closer to the mark than if you see yourself as a victim and as somebody that is doomed to live the rest of their life as a person that's weakened instead of strengthened by this. So then he goes on to talk about forgiveness. How this is where I kind of disagree with him. The quote that he has about forgiveness is, about the same time I came to understand that forgiveness does not mean forgetfulness, is the time that I came to accept that I did not forgive people because I was weak, but because I was strong enough to do so. I realized that my ability to forgive was about who I wanted to be as a person. the greater value I was trying to place on my future, and the diminished power the past was having over me. I'm gonna leave off here into the next video because YouTube cuts off my videos at 15 minutes or so. Kisses.